Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Sam for another special spoiler discussion. And we are back on Monday talking all things The Last of Us, Episode 5, Endure and Survive. One of the best TV episodes of the year. I know it's February. One of the best episodes of this show. One of my favourite episodes of modern TV. I'm going to go that far to say. But before I keep hyping up, Sam, how are you doing tonight?
Very good, very good. Yeah, it was nice to get it early, although it's now weird to talk about
We're
it.
late.
We're late. It's 2 days after that, and then it's also we've now had to wait another week. It feels like we should only be waiting 5 days, and it's like, okay, we've got to wait a bit longer, which is annoying. But it was nice to get it. So but all good, and it's good to have a high octane episode like we got, with some very memorable moments.
Yeah, and it's given everyone else a lot more time to watch this week's episode because, as you mentioned, it aired early. It was announced last Monday when the last episode aired that suddenly it will be out on Friday. Super Bowl was last night. I've not actually seen the flash trailer yet. I've had a very busy day. And last night we were on an amazing review of the Titanic, which was 1 second longer than it took for the real ship to sink, which wasn't intentional, but it ended up being that long. So you can check that out. So thank you again for coming on that yesterday, Sam. It's been a busy weekend. It's been a busy week. It's been a busy few weeks. But it is episode 5 of The Last of Us. We're starting to build towards Star Celebration. We've just finished the James Cameron retrospective. But we want to hear from everyone watching at home. So please do comment your thoughts on The Last of Us episode 5. As we always say, it's a spoiler discussion. You can bring up everything, but please do avoid dropping spoilers for the game. For people that are watching that haven't seen those, it's just a polite thing to do. And if you are curious, you're not watching it live, you're watching later on, you can comment below your thoughts. We'll reply to them and have a look at those. And if you want to find us on our social medias to find out what other videos are coming up, it's going to be weird to plug things because we finished one of our first shows of the year yesterday. Get us on Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinema_savvy, and we've got a link to Redbubble in the description below. But as I said, we're here talking episode 5 of The Last of Us. Now, I know I hyped this up to you. I know that episode 3, the world hyped up. And episode 3 surpassed, I think, the world's hype. It's generally one of the best episodes of TV. An amazing discussion on that. What were your thoughts before episode 5 and then after watching
it? So we had our discussion last week about episode 4, and I think I was definitely on that train of this. Definitely feels like it could be like a 2-parter. That is, these episodes will flow together, probably more so than any of the others so far, which I think is true, made sense. And I was really excited to go into it because it was the introduction of Sam and Henry and this completely different type of storyline, which we've not had in this show yet. It feels like we've had a lot of variety in this show, despite the low amount of episodes, really. It's not like there's been loads of drive with just one set of characters for a significant amount of time. There's always been different dynamics, which has been really interesting to see. So yeah, coming into this, I was fairly confident that we would get a good episode out of it. And I know you were really hyped about this one. You'd said that it was going to be good, and it was excellent. It was probably, for me, I think episode 3 is still my favorite, and then either episode 1 or this episode would be next down the line. Probably the last episode. Episode 4 is probably like my least favorite so far, but it's your least favorite in an excellent set of episodes, so it's really nothing to be sad about or anything. So going into this, I was fairly positive, and I think just actually watching the full episode on Saturday, you go through a journey. It goes very quickly, but you go through an emotional roller coaster, and probably you more so than me, but I absolutely was there as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'll go back to when I first watched this a few weeks ago. I'll go back further than that. When this show was when it was announced years before the show, it's going to be a film. We've mentioned Sam and Henry a lot, and we've never been able to dive into it. And this week we finally really can. My knowledge of the games industry isn't what it is for film. Right? I can't sit here and tell you about this and that, this famous storylines. But The Last of Us, to me, I think is the best game I've ever played. And that's up for debate. People fine. And I know, obviously, in terms of like acclaim and whatnot, we know The Last of Us is up there with anything else. And the thing that got me playing it for the first time all those years ago was Sam and Henry. And I didn't cry or anything as a teenager. I was playing a game. It's a really weird thing where I think I said to you, Ella, I've never cried at a game. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because it's pixels, but then I cry animated stuff all the time. Looking at you Inside Out. But it's something where when this was announced to be a film, I was like, you can never do a film. Like you wouldn't be, you'd be cutting out things like Sam and Henry or this and that. And then when the TV show was announced, I was like, oh my, like we're actually going to get Sam and Henry on TV. And I remember they did an open casting call for a young actor to play the role of Sam. And I remember it being on the news because they were looking for an actor who is naturally deaf, and that was something they wanted to opt with for filming. Which, following casting announcements isn't exactly. It's not something I tend to do for shows I like, but it made itself into mass media in a really good way. Like, we think they're casting their Sam for the show. This is sort of where The Last of Us is building towards. And I remember I was there like, oh my God, they're doing it. They're doing the Sam and Henry storyline like in the game. And that's kind of what not had me hyped in. So obviously watching it, we didn't know what episode they'd come in. I didn't. I got all 9 at once. We saw them in the posters. We saw casting announcements. I can't remember if they made it into the trailer at all. That's something that I would need to obviously sort of double check in regards to that. But we've obviously got Lamar Johnson, who plays Henry, and I apologize on pronunciation, Kevon Woodward as Sam. So these guys have been at the forefront of marketing. We've had posters for them individually. And when I was binging that show, and episode 4 came to Kansas City, and I was like, okay. And then obviously we get the great subplot of Cap, and I love we'll probably talk about it a little bit later, but the concept and character of Kathleen is actually one of my favorite things they've done in the entire series, which I'll get into a little bit later on with the Sam and Henry backstory. But last week, Henry was almost this like, who is Henry? Who, if you didn't know, who's Henry? Why is she obsessed with this Henry guy? And it was a smart way to do a cliffhanger. And I'm the same as you. Like, if you had to rank the episodes, if you had like guns ahead, rank them, 4's probably at the bottom so far. But it's because to me, it's a shorter episode. It's setting up a 2-parter, and after episode 3, and there's no problem with it being there, but it gives you that cliffhanger. And I do think the Super Bowl gap helped that it was a shorter wait to get episode 5, because a lot of people were tweeting about this on Saturday about watching episode 5 for the first time, and watching that first screening, it's coming. We'll talk about the level, the game, and everything later on, but when you know what's going to come, when you know what's going to happen, and there's an extended conversation like before, I was like, they're making this far more emotional than it's going to be. I just had tears rolling. I can't remember what I put on my reaction. It kind of cocked up doing the Super Bowl Sunday because it couldn't be like, well, we're going live tonight. We didn't. I was crying loads in episode 5. I had to take a break because I knew what I'd just witnessed and what we'd gone through. I wasn't ready for the gravestone. And rewatching it Saturday. I mean, I think we said this before in advertising yesterday. It's like, I woke up on Saturday morning. It was like 9 o'clock. Went downstairs, like, Dad, do you want to watch this tonight? We'd have to wait till Monday now. Thank God, because I wouldn't have been able to watch it otherwise today. And I just turned to him as it finished, and I could just see his watery eyes as well.
Oh.
Point. We both cried. We know it. With that sort of subtle respect of, we're not going to say anything. But it was just, sorry, I've been waffling for a couple of minutes now, but yeah.
No, well, you've said to me before, about the importance of the game anyway, and for you, and you've just said it before, the importance of these characters, and I think it really showcases how important they are to the game, despite them not really being central to the main plots. It really is just kind of secondary side characters that you meet along the way, and this is in a very similar way done in the show. But, as we've kind of said with Tess before and with Bill and Frank, these characters that you may get more of in the game, you get probably more time with Bill, you get more time with Tess, and more time with Henry and Sam. you can get way more emotionally out of this TV show by getting some very strong interactions and getting more backstory and really getting a true sense of like who they are, which makes the actual emotional moments hit even harder. And what I commend the show for doing is kind of looking at these emotional moments, especially kind of the deaths of characters, and going, right,
Yeah.
this is we can hit this beat again. We could do the exact same thing and it'll hit. What do we do to kind of make this work better for this new format that we're doing it in? And also just kind of make a more unique story. And which basically the emotional beats for Sam and Henry's end, and we'll talk more about it later, like are practically the same, but the way it's done is so different and just changes the concepts of what that was supposed to mean and be. And it gives our characters that we're with, especially Ellie, way more than the characters did in the game. So it's just things that seem small actually create a massive difference. So yeah, I love that you've had probably a more emotional reaction to this TV show than the game, which I know you already loved them in that game anyway. So
yeah, it's a really fascinating one, that dynamic, and I'm curious if other people that have played the game can be like that. Where so I know there's some people would probably try and laugh at something like that, which I don't think is fair, but it's one of those where it's just fascinating how much difference a medium can make. And kind of with these two, we've got a comment Chaz I'll bring up. Episode 5 was a great ride. When we got to the motel, 10 minutes left, the game fan in me knew what was coming. Back to us for Henry and Sam was superb, and this is kind of it, that what this has done incredible at episode 3. Rather than just bringing Henry and Sam, be like, we're two survivors, we're on the run, let's team up. We learned so much more by getting the backstory. And even the episode beginning, like 11 days before, I think, they didn't tell you outright, but we've known Pedro are these Nazis, right? It's episode 3. We see bits of it in 1 and 2. And then we get given an opening scene of them being overthrown, and suddenly you pity them. They're getting hung in the street. They're getting shot at point blank range for everyone to see. It is. Let's be honest, it's probably how a coup would be in real life. Obviously it's not the sort of thing we'd get on camera and whatnot, like on a show, but the opening scene is so horrifically graphic. And that's where I kind of not loved it, because that's sort of psychotic, but I was like, oh, we're getting their backstory. Now we know we can't do a Bill and Frank because we're not going back X amount of years. This is sort of 10 days before. But that sort of 10, 15 minutes where we get to see the relationship between them build, going up to the attic with the doctor that we've already seen murders, seeing the room go from being bare to having the drawings everywhere to going through their rations. It was a really smart and quick way to I think, give them a bit of backstory, but it still never answered the question of why is Henry on the run? And I don't think there's any points in saying, oh, it was obvious that, he would have betrayed them for his brother. But the core message of The Last of Us is love, right? That's what Neil Druckmann spoke about. That is the core. That's the meaning of the series, of the story, every relationship. This is a sibling love for one another. That he's protecting his younger brother. And getting tidbits of that in the behind the scenes. And even Kathleen, we'll get into it a little bit later, but her story is having a sibling taken from her. The parallels with Henry and Sam and Kathleen and her brother, I think, are amazing in this episode. And I think this is so layered to a point I don't want to say we've not had, because Bill and Frank is still the best episode, definitively, I think, of the series. This is my favorite episodes. But certainly my perspective was, by having these further details with them, when we do get to them meeting Joel and Ellie, that meeting feels far more normal. That if you'd never been introduced to Henry and Sam, if you're someone that's not played the game, and these guys have had guns to their heads, we know the guns are empty as well. But if you don't know that, when you get the opening scene, it wouldn't work. But because we know these two, they've been on the run, they could be good people. I think it makes sense how Joel and Ellie not just trust them, but we get to see their relationship develop in their opening scene, let alone, the next couple of the scenes after. But I know sort of spoke for. What did you think of the backstory for them? I know it's not a massive backstory, and we get it developed a little bit later, but
yeah, it was definitely less extensive than we've had for other things, I guess. But I was actually quite surprised about how recent the kind of coup was. That it was just less than 2 weeks since Fedra fell, which does bring about some ideas. I think I mentioned last time about how Fedra may have been seen at the beginning of the infection as kind of the people in charge and whatnot. But as we've seen throughout this, there's different places which are now not under that control, whether it's because they've just been overtaken by the infected, or whether or not the people inside have fought against it. And this was obviously the latter. So it was interesting to actually see some of that. And like we get Kathleen being an absolute menace to those informants, which was actually horrendous. I didn't like to see that, but it just shows her absolute ruthlessness. And I will talk a bit more about Kathleen because like you said, like she's very interesting, and I kind of
character as well.
Yeah, and I kind of wish we had even more, because I would love to sympathize with her more, and I can't, because there is certain things where I'm just like, well, really, you need to think. But to just see all that happen and see how the story intersects with Joel and Ellie, and how Henry and Sam kind of survive, the friendship with the Doctor, how just kind of going through what we see in episode 4, but through the perspective of Henry and Sam, and just getting that so it lines up. And I like that it did go quickly. I don't think we needed it to be super extended. We could have had flashbacks to further back, potentially. Yeah. We could have had that, and part of me does want to see that, but maybe it wasn't entirely necessary for this. And I think the importance was to have the dynamic between the two sets of characters and what that actually does, and then go back to Kathleen and see what her perspective is. But again, like we've said with some of the other characters, it's just great to know a bit more, and for there to be a bigger reason why they are a part of this story. It's not just because they are random. They are survivors, of course, but they've gone through something really traumatic anyway, and they just want to live. They just want to get out. They don't want to hurt anyone. And I think that's the key thing. They're not wanting to go against people trying to hurt them yet. They've got all these people, all these adults, these grown adults trying to go after them. And what we see at the end is that Kathleen doesn't even care about Sam either. She'd be perfectly happy if he wasn't there. So it's wonderful to have this new perspective when we didn't have that in the game. And I think these are the choices that I'm really kind of agreeing with. There's not much that I don't agree with the decisions that they make. It seems that what they're doing is for the right reasons. And so I'm just really glad that we've managed to get that good blend that we've talked about before, about the old and the new, really.
Yeah, it's a really good point, that, and the Kathleen stuff I think sort of falls in line. That you mentioned that opening scene of hers in this, where she's got all the informers rounded up, and you can make comparisons to real life Nazi Germany. It certainly a rise to power. It was the advisory, we the people, but we are equally as bad people as they were, and we'll charge you, you'll be guilty, but we'll still charge you. And it's the way the mercenaries just walk in, like the whole group of them. You don't even need to hear the bullets going. It's the screaming of them realizing what's about to happen. And there's something so sadistic that works. And it's going back to the concept of adaptation, right? When you play the game, you do a level on, it's not Kansas City, but you do the level. Then you do another separate story underwater. Then you go to the town. We're back. We've not seen you for like 5 hours, but it's still us. And it doesn't not work. It's a great bit, but with this series creating Kathleen, with this series creating Perry, bringing in some backstory, developing Henry and Sam, it just makes it so much more interesting to a viewer, to an audience. The writing is so much better, and in turn of all of this, still get to develop Joel and Ellie, because one of my favorite scenes of this is Joel's apology to Henry later on. So obviously, Henry's honest with him and says, I wasn't informed. It's why I'm on the run, and you need my help. And I love that Henry begins as this sort of arrogant person to Joel that you can just tell Joel's got no time for. He's probably killed people like this for less, but he knows he needs his help. And I love Pedro Pascal's reactions with him throughout. And when you get to the scene in the sewer, it's the apology. It's the moment he wakes up. Well, not he wakes up, but he realizes that, I understand why you did it. And he kind of says, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand. And to Joel, that's an apology. That's something you wouldn't say. And by giving them the backstory to that, they're able to just develop it so much more, because when you meet them in the game, they're on the run. And when you're playing a game, it doesn't matter. You meet people, you meet compatriots, you go with them. But in the series, you kind of want to know, what is it that made them so specific? Why have they created new characters? Why is Henry a villain to these people? And it just opens up so much more. We've got another great comment by Chaz, who put, from the HBO podcast, listen to Mazin said Lamar Johnson had to learn sign language the role, and did it in one weekend. Attic was the first episode out. And this is kind of it. We had Coda that came out last year, and this is no comparison to Coda, just very quickly to get it out there. But certainly in the last few years, cinema, TV, we're seeing way more, not just diversity, but we're seeing them cast, in this situation, a young deaf actor. I always think of Walt Jr. in Breaking Bad, that he had cerebral palsy in real life, the actor. I've forgotten his name. A very minor form compared to how he gets to act it within the series. But it made it not just an authentic performance, the fact that in real life, it really showed his acting ability. And what I kind of loved, the chemistry that Lamar had in this with Kevon, for, again, for it to be done on sign language, it just really worked. And if their relationship doesn't work, the ending can't work. The build-up can't work. You've got to develop them, because we know these are two cast characters. Mm-hmm. When they were cast, when those posters came out, you'd go to the comments on Twitter, and people had crying faces. People, those that know, those that don't, that thing pops up as usual. And I think so much of this series depends on Henry and Sam. We're at the midpoint. This is past the midpoint of this episode now. This is episode 5 out of 9. You need not something big to happen, but we're really seeing Bella Ramsey come into her own as Ellie, who I think is amazing in this again today. And her relationship with Kevon as well, she's not really been able to meet, not kids, but, she's got someone that's not an adult, and she's being a kid. They're reading comics, endure, survive. There's this amazing chemistry, and it's so uplifting, because we just know the terrible reality behind of what's going to happen to them at the end. And I think they've gone into this series knowing everyone knows how it ends with Henry and Sam. Let's sort of build it more. Let's develop them more, because when it's going to hit, it's going to hit so much harder than it ever could have. Even replacing the toy, which I know we're jumping ahead.
Yeah.
Controversial, but I don't know what the thing is. I don't know if it's like an Etch-a-Sketch type thing. I was so perplexed watching it for the first time. I was like, what is this technology? It's like them ripping paper out. Like, it flips and it's gone. I don't know what it is. If someone can let me know. Sorry, that's a really random time.
No, I've seen it before. Like, definitely in the past. I don't know when, but I have seen that being used, but maybe not that. I mean, that definitely looks like it's been kind of crafted out of a couple of things, maybe. But it essentially is an Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah, so I just keep thinking of Etch-a-Sketch, like having the little Toy Story logo. You play the PS2 game. Anyway, sorry, I'm diverting. So, kind of jumping back into this storyline, I want to talk about the plan. Getting to the tunnels. Now, we know last week, we know that there are infected underground. Mm-hmm. And we know that those guys are going to come out eventually. I'm not saying it was obvious it was going to happen today. It wasn't obvious at all, for me at least. Obviously, we know in the game, once you get to the level, you're like, okay, we know what's going to happen now. But I want to talk about the sewers, which we know is a massive part of the game. The story of Ish, who has the boat, who has almost the suicide letter, who moves inside, who accepts families. You read this incredible life story through notes in the game, through collectibles. And this is one of the things I've never forgotten about the game, is that how could I have ever been so drawn into not just a fictional storyline, a character we'll never meet, who just wrote notes and has done so well in the game. There's this, I want to go around every room because I want to know what happened to them all. And in the game, you just mysteriously find more bodies as every room goes onwards. When we went to the sewer in this and you saw the room, I was like, oh my God, they've done the sewers room. And I kind of had this moment watching it where, for the first few, I didn't get emotional at all. I was just sort of sat there like, this is way above calling it a reference. This is set design. These are people who clearly have affection for the game, who want to put this thing, a room that will mean nothing to millions and mean a lot more to others, that has no importance to the story, but you'll get to develop these two kids there playing, living in the moment. We've got the football, we've got the goal, and in the backdrop we have Joel's apology to Henry. And I just think there's a wonderful scene in there, and maybe it's because I've got the attachments to the game, and we obviously get a drawing of Ish as well, which is the exact same drawing from the game, which they have on the wall. And again, that is a real life Easter egg moment. That the term Easter egg so horrendously overused these days, but that's a genuine one. That if to 99% of people, that's just going to be like two people's drawing on the wall. But if you remember, if you've done it all, you'll be like, there's so much more meaning to that this story happened for real. But did you have anything like the sewers, or is it just me being mental?
I definitely think you more so than me. However, I think part of it's just because it's been a long time since I played the game. But I definitely saw the room and was like, whoa, this. I feel like I know I've seen this before. And, you mentioned about Ish's story, and I love it in games anyway, when there's kind of references to the wider, the wider universe, because especially in games, you kind of need that, because a lot of time you're following one set of characters or just one character, and you can't really see different perspectives. So by picking up pieces of paper and whatnot, or finding comics, you are just getting to learn a little bit more about that universe. There's something similar in Jedi Fallen Order, where Cal can get is it the memories, the kind of visions, and he hears he hears voices and stories, and you can actually follow people's stories, and some it's actually terrible what happens, and very, very similar in The Last of Us in the game. So to just have reference to that is great, because we don't necessarily need that here, because they can actually build the stories themselves and we can see it happen. But to just have that is lovely, and I think it's a perfect setting in a really awful way to kind of have this slow moment, and to just kind of let these people relax a little bit, because you expect when they get into the sewers for the infected to be there. I think the casual viewer would probably expect that, and even I thought, well, they could change things, they could do anything, and then I was kind of tense. I was like, well, are they going to pop up now? Is it going to be really slow, and then suddenly going to be everyone's going to be everywhere? I don't know, but yeah. And so you mentioned about the dynamic between Henry and Sam is important. I absolutely, that is so true. But the separate dynamics between Henry and Joel, and then Sam and Ellie, are so important as well. And I think this for me was Ellie's turning point for me, because you get to see one side of her that we've not seen yet, and kind of allowing herself to relax a bit more, and kind of not her naivety, but just
she's
her
child.
Just her honest, true self, who she would like to be, maybe a bit more carefree. And ultimately it leads to more sadness and darkness that she just has to walk away from, which is horrendous for someone her age, and horrendous for anyone going through this. But it's so lovely to see them playing football, for Ellie to, does she do some sign language? Maybe not totally, but
she tries. Endure and
she
survive. They start learning with each other, don't they? And it's
that's so. I think just the inclusion of ASL anyway, I think, was such a nice choice, and I think it's just something different to see, and it's nice to have that diversity there, and the fact that we learn about Sam's leukemia. It's just having this backstory is amazing, and I think it just adds so much more to these characters. When, again, like I said before, they were perfectly fine as they were, but it just makes everything so sad, and everyone's been crying. Everyone has been crying about this, because it's just such a tragedy. But I think The Last of Us in itself is a tragedy. If it's not about love, it's about tragedy and about these things happen.
And that's the kind of the not the beauty of it, but I think it's why it fundamentally works. Is it's not. This is the episode. This is the turning point in Ellie's life that, she felt guilty over Tess's death, not sad. That's how I've always envisioned those episodes. She didn't know how to really talk to Joel about it. This is the first time where she feels responsible, that she's built the relationship. I mean, okay, we know the backstory of You Played Left Behind, and we know that that's going to be eventually shown at some point on the episodes because it's in the trailers. But it's the first time we've got to see her build this relationship with someone and that come to an end. And I think, without jumping too far, just that I'm sorry on the gravestone is probably like the most, and that's why to me, you can forget the Transformer, which is something I love. I don't know if it's meant to be a Transformer, but you know what I mean.
I always thought it was like a Megazord or something. It was something
it was,
that.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And it was a cool thing because obviously, Henry, you can't take anything, you can't take nothing, only our valuables, and it's the innocence of a child. And I know they aged down Sam in this as well, which I think is really interesting. And I think Craig Mazin spoke and said that one of the reasons for this is that he wanted him to have Ellie to look up to rather than an equal. He wanted to look up to Ellie as a person, which is why we obviously get the blood stuff at the end. But it just keeps you on your toes throughout. And as we kind of said, like, this is going to be a short episode this week. I know we went for an incredible amount of time, episode 3. But moving forward, because most of this is going to be about Sam and Henry, the shootout post-sewers, when they were going through, I thought something's too easy here. Now, obviously, we know what happens in the game. But the sniper, the moment the sniper hit, I just had this wave of PTSD. Because I was like, oh my God, we're doing the sniper. I didn't think we'd do this. I thought that's something that missed because the sniper level, and I don't know how, because it's been easy on every version since, that's the level I died the most at playing the game on PS3. I could never do it. I don't know, I just didn't have enough supplies. I don't know if it's because I was rubbish. But the sniper was so hard for me to ever play. And when they just had the sniper shooting, I was like, they're really doing this. Like, this is amazing. Because again, it's not, haha, look at us doing this thing from a game. This is them setting up a scenario to put everyone in peril except for Joel. And the way that the scene sort of followed, this is where I'm going to sort of go on a tangent and now go back to Kathleen and what happened there. It would be so, like, the game is so random, they just turn up like a few days later. Like, you escaped our city, you crossed the bridge, you jumped off the water, we found you days later. Whereas this is, no, it's the same people chasing you. We've just been able to merge like 3 chapters of a game into 2 episodes, which has done it much better, and it is why you get adaptation for TV. But the moment we get the shootout, we get the army coming, Kathleen keeping there a lot longer. Because we've seen Kathleen developed as a character, we understand why she wants to kill Henry. Henry's responsible for the death of her brother, the leader of the resistance. The, I think, very underrated scene of Perry saying, you're the one that overthrew them, not your brother. But as horrible as it's going to sound, that's the reality, was that your vengeance for, you overthrew them. It wasn't ever anything else. They didn't need to develop why they overthrew them either. That's what I loved with that. They didn't need to show them storming buildings. We got the aftermath on the day, the party, the celebration, and the whole segment just worked so much better because we've had relationships being developed. Kathleen, again, how awful the children die and Sam's going to die still. It's so not just chaotic. You started to pity her. You started to understand her a bit more. And then she's saying, I still want to kill the kid, though, because kids are going to die and you're going to die too. But the moment the earth starts to move, I mean, what did you think? When the car goes upwards, without doing a Titanic reference, because it does go up and sink like the Titanic.
There's an edit
plug
there.
Yesterday's review, plug it. What were your thoughts that moment? Like, were you so focused on the characters, do you just forgot about the infected? Because I'd completely forgot they were meant to be part of this.
I mean, my focus was on, wow, Kathleen, you are terrible. Like, I absolutely Like I said last week, I love Melanie Linsky, and I really enjoyed her dynamic with Perry.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I'm like, but you've been such a hypocrite. You're saying that, oh, well, basically Sam's not important, whereas maybe your brother wasn't important. Like literally, you are pot calling kettle. It's so, and I just wanted to like shake her and just say, you know what you're doing. You're just being a terrible person, and you've let this grief consume. I mean, she's a Sith. She's a Sith. I am doing good. She's Anakin Skywalker in The Last of Us. This is for the greater good. What I'm doing is for the greater good. I'm going to kill all these people, but it's for the greater good. I'm like, well, maybe it's not. But so that was what I was feeling to her at that time. And then it went down, and I'm just like, wait. And I know in the trailer you see the blow to come out in like flame and whatnot, and I'm like, but in my mind, I'm like, but were they under this house? I was like, what's underneath here? Like in my mind, I was a little bit confused about where they actually were, what was under the ground, whether it's a separate tunnel or I don't know, or a separate sewer, whatever. But then you just saw how many came out, and I was like, oh crap, like this is insane. Because you do kind of think, oh well, there's never that many. And I think that's the shock, because even in the game, there's usually there can be loads, but it's very rare that there is that many. And usually when it is, it's during kind of like not quick time events, but do you know when it's kind of like you're kind of in control, but you're not. It's kind of like half a cut scene, half not, because that's where they're able to put that many on there. To see them again, and it was very similar in episode 2, wasn't it, where there was that many, but to see them just completely overtake this army is ridiculous. And then to have, I didn't even realize that the clicker was a child. I didn't realize it wasn't a clicker.
It's like a 7-year-old. No, it's like a 7-year-old contortionist that did this or something in real life.
Yeah, I think so. And I was like, crap. When I heard that, I was like, wow. I mean, we barely see kind of when there's any form of zombie show, we never really see, children who are zombies. It's very rare, and they're usually just there for shock value. Like, and I will go back to The Walking Dead. I feel like I need to at least.
I've seen this clip. This clip was going viral around recently, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, you have like the very beginning of The Walking Dead, where the first zombie you see is a child, a little girl, and then there's a very, very important scene in season 2 where there's a child walker as well. And I think there's the odd other one as well, but it is very rare. So to just have one fully there chasing Ellie, it's really freaking. I feel I got like a bit of like Jurassic Park, the Lost World, where it's like exactly, but then the Velociraptor can actually get in really quickly, and it's the fact that we've seen these infected move in these really weird, twisted ways. And the fact that they got an actual contortionist and a child to do that, I just think that I just love the imagination that the people behind this are doing, because it's making for some fantastic moments, some memorable moments. And you think all is going bad anyway, and then the bloater comes out. And I know people were upset about the school scene being missing, but I mean, I wasn't that bothered about it, just as long as the bloater actually appeared, because for me, that's the main part of that. So to have one come out and to do what it did, I was just like, well done. You completed this week's task. Rips Perry's head off. Just fantastic. But like the look was just on point. The sounds were on point. I just think this part of the adaptation of the actual infected has just been marvelous, because they're so important. And we've said the clickers were probably the most important, but bloaters as well. I mean, they didn't do the spores, and we know why, because of that's not really the key part of how people get infected now. But just the brute force and the size of this thing alone is enough to do it justice. I loved it, and it was a shock, and it was probably like the best part of the episode. It was the most exciting part of the episode.
It's so well done, and I think credits them for having the concepts. We kept them underground. It gave us tension at the start of the episode with them going in a tunnel. Last week, and this is why this episode is genius to me. Last week, Kathleen seals off the building because the ground is rumbling. There's something under there, and it's going to come out very soon. Cut to this, the car, the explosion, probably open the opportunity for them all to go in, great. I love the idea that I think they say 3 years there were no zombies. Sorry, not zombies, infected. 3 years. If you've got 3 years worth of infected in there, the logic of a bloater makes sense. We don't need an origin for a bloater. But if you've been underground for 3 years and you're like this insane, buffed up, infected thing, okay, that's believable. But the moment the hundreds pour out, they go for that like long shot where you just see it. It's like
Out of the flames, like out of hell.
Do you remember World War Z, the trailer where they have the pyramid of the zombies?
Yes.
Like the trailer shot. It was like an underground version of that, and it just made it so much more authentic that you'd kept hundreds underground. Because if you kept them underground for 3 years, that's like almost none of them. That'd be a bit pointless. But the characters were in peril. Ellie crawling to the car and bodies just flinging around her. No one spotting it. It just worked so well. Sam and Henry under their car with their issues as well.
Someone actually said they were like it's like Hard Home in Game of Thrones. Is that kind of intensity where and it reminded me of like the Battle at Winterfell as well. Like literally things that are happening all around. A car randomly just smashing past, like it's like it literally reminded me of that horse going past like Jon Snow. Like it's just those types of shots are insane.
And I think so. If I talk about watching it early again, episode 5 was the first episode where there was like a formal work in progress title before the credits. Work in progress. And I was like, okay. And I remember going back to the start with Pedro, you get the shot of Henry seeing Joel shooting out, and they're playing the Dunkirk temp music. I was like, okay, Gustavo's not got the score done for episodes 5 through to 9 yet. Fine. Then there was temp music of Man of Steel when the car's driving at them. Then there's temp music of another Hans Zimmer. There was a lot of Hans Zimmer in this episode. In the work in progress. I was loving it because as soon as I clocked Dunkirk, I was like, why is the Dunkirk theme in this? No one else would have clocked that's Dunkirk if that was played to them. And when the zombies first come, they're like, like when they're not fully rendered, because it's a work in progress. So we had that kind of CG models running, giant bloater man work in progress shot, and it didn't take anything away from it. I was so invested in it. But if I'd have seen that on a cinema tonight, if I'd have seen that for the first time, the bloater looked amazing. And for all the extra time it takes them for them to get that right, I know they updated the trailer with the updated VFX of it, but you see where the money's going. The visual effects, they're not letting anyone down. The practical effects look amazing. The fact that the contortionist was a girl, an actress, how many people just CGI that thing? You'd think it's CGI. But it's not, which that makes it more terrifying. And the fact it then like massacres Kathleen as well. Was it like ripping her like face apart? It's
not like, so clear because it's so rapid. There's so much kind of ferocity in it, which you kind of want, but at the same time,
kind of like stingrays. They can like not like a machine gun, but they can claim they can when it's like defensive. Stingrays can like do that sort of thing. Yeah. I'm sure there's other animals that can, but it was like it was doing that to her face, like a million miles an hour, just ripping it apart. And we don't see it. You hear noises. You don't see it go. And I think that works in its favor because you can picture a worse death for Kathleen. We've seen the visual of Perry's head being ripped off. But we don't need to see Kathleen. We know what's happened there. And it's the shot I love is just the army being overrun and them running away to the city. Because what it says to me, for the series that's about love, about survival, yes, they overthrew Fedra, a corrupt organization. They had their day. 11 days later, they were emerging anyway. Every single person that celebrated that is now dead. They would have been dead even if they didn't go and see Joel and Ellie at that place. And it is that survival instinct that The Last of Us, they were all going to die anyway. You can't keep a city free. The infected's going to come and get you. They're going to get everyone. That hole in the ground is now here. They're off on their adventure. And it's such an impactful way for them to do that. And I think there's just a bit more to it for me. Like the rewatch on Saturday really did help. But I think when this, I'm probably gonna rewatch the series as a whole if they do a 4K release, on Blu-ray, like the House of Dragon. I'm just excited to see it as a full, see what everyone thinks, listen to the podcasts, get everyone's thoughts, and then go and do the series again. Because there's going to be so many more things to take into account every episode. Even Joel not wanting to kill the sniper, he goes, put it down, call it off, just let us go on. I don't have to kill you. And obviously he does. But just, I think it was just so expertly done, the whole leading up to Kansas being, massacred. And of course we have Henry, Sam, Joel and Ellie getting away, getting to the motel. We know what's coming. Do we want to talk about it? Should we talk about the last scene, the conversation with Ellie and Sam, which is just, it's heartbreaking because I love this concept that for the TV game, for the TV adaptation, Ellie's aware that she's going to be a cure, but she doesn't know why. She's innocent. She's a 14-year-old. There's this kid she's got to know, who she really likes, who's just announced he's been bitten. She knows shit. But I love that her mindset isn't, I'm scared. Her mindset is, I want to help you. I'm here to help you. I want to help you. I want you to live. I want you to be okay. And just the delivery of the extra sketch of, other people in there. Have you seen Top Gun Maverick? Sorry. It's really random.
I've not, no.
That's fine. So one of the best scenes of the entire film is when Iceman comes back. This is not a spoiler.
Yeah.
And because if anyone knows the real life stuff behind that, the dialogue of his is typed on a computer. But the way Tom Cruise shoots the scene, the way that the director's done it all, it's like one of the most emotional scenes because we know. Oh my god, I've just blanked on the actor's name. That's really embarrassing.
Val Kilmer.
How on earth did I just blank on Val Kilmer's name? That's very embarrassing. When you know the reality of why Val Kilmer can't speak, the scene itself, it's an emotional scene for the film. It's a very important scene for the film. It's a make or break scene for Tom Cruise's emotional character's mindset. And the words come on screen, and I was crying. And I was like, if I can cry at literally like a keyboard text on a screen in Top Gun, a kid drawing basically saying, am I gonna be alive inside this monster? It was haunting because we know what's coming next, and I just think the way they chose to have Ellie helping made it just so much more real and a testament to again Bella Ramsey's performance. This is, I think, end of episode 4. I know jumping ahead, the shot of her walking away. That's Ellie. That's going to be Ellie now. She is now fully Ellie. Not I'm Spider-Man. How Spider-Man walks away at the end of Spider-Man 1.
Yeah,
kicks in. This is like that moment for Ellie. Is Sam and Henry have to be there for these two to have that bleak look on the world. I know I've just jumped ahead, sorry, but what were your thoughts on the scene before the big one?
I was conflicted at first because you go in with an expectation if you've played the game, and then for it to be different, especially in this thing, you do think, is this the right way to go? And in my mind at first, I was like, oh, maybe this isn't, because the whole thing about the reveal in the game is that it's a shock to everyone else but us what's going to happen. And even then, we find out just before it happens, basically. Whereas in this, we find out at the same time as Ellie that Sam's been infected. And at first I was like, I'm not sure if that's right. But then to get the exchange, to get the perspectives of two children trying to maybe figure this out, for Ellie to maybe think, I don't know whether there'll be like a full explanation as to what Ellie was thinking, but whether or not she either truly believed that maybe she could help, or whether it was just to comfort, to say, oh, I'm this will help. I think in any way that you take it, it's such a beautiful scene, and I think it just showcases both the actors and what they're doing, and just the whole setup of it is just gorgeous, but ultimately extremely tragic, and you just don't want it to happen, but it is. But the fact that Ellie doesn't know how, like you said, she doesn't know how she's going to be, if she's going to be a cure, how that's going to happen, but to just try her blood to see, it shows who she is as a person, and that she and it shows what she could do later down the line. Whereas if hurting herself is going to help others, she will do it. So I think that's a really important trait of hers, at least that she could have for now. And we had like the bit just before with Henry and Joel and saying about like continuing on to Wyoming and stuff, and there's just kind of this hopefulness that you kind of think, and that a false sense of security for audiences. But yeah, and to just say, "I'll stay awake with you," it's just. I just love kind of the camaraderie there, and that after such a short amount of time they managed to kind of build that relationship.
One episode, like 3/4 of an episode, they built that relationship, and just even getting to the moment in the morning where I think it's so much more impactful because she knows he's been bitten, but just him sat on the bed, not standing by the window like the game, just sat on the edge of the bed where you think he's all right, and it's just what followed. I mean. The scene itself, the death scene for both of them, something we've known is coming since this series was ever announced. It's so, I don't like using words like brutal because it's too obvious, but it's sort of traumatizing that you look at Henry as a character, he risked everything to protect his brother. He portrayed the one person, not he liked, but he betrayed, what he called the best man. He knew, and he had to betray him to keep his brother alive. Kill his brother a lot quicker than in the game. I'm going to add that kid hits the ground, couple of seconds, bang. And my dad first said to me, he's like, "Do we think he thought they were playing?" And that hadn't even crossed my mind that if he didn't know, obviously we know they're not playing, they've been bitten, but Henry doesn't know what's happened. He's just shot his brother because his brother's just jumped on Ellie and she's screaming and he's trying to bite. We don't know. He knows he's fully, but. Not showing the body, I think, was so important, but just that pool of blood is horrific. And it's just HBO doing what they've done so well over the decades. Craig Mazin with Chernobyl. Chernobyl was so good at doing that, not body horror, but like using the environment to create those illusions of the scenario people are in. And it was just hard not to cry at that point. And then turning the gun on himself like so quickly. Not drawn out, nothing like that, just so quick, boom, headshot. And I'm thinking, okay, I know the game, it cuts the black ride, they go to like winter. But to get the burial, that's where I was gone. I was completely gone at this point. That it adds so much more to add that scene. It shows what Joel thinks of them, that they both, I don't want to say respect, and that's unfair, but they cared for them. They were going to go on the journey with them. They were going to come with them to Wyoming. Joel liked Henry. There was a relationship there for all of them. And they've had to bury them again. 2 more people. And every week it's become a bit of a trend. You look at our thumbnails. Every person who's been on the thumbnails has died in the series. And it goes back to that message of what is living. Henry's not going to live in a world where he killed his brother, let alone be without his brother. And he would choose that option. And it's so traumatizing. Again, it goes back to the everyone died for almost nothing in this arc, which is why it's so ingenious to me that it's about survival, and Joel and Ellie do continue to survive. Not everyone. Joel says luck is a reason he survives most of the time, and you sit here thinking it's true that all the people that have loved and lost in this is just unbelievable TV. And for me, it's my favorite episode. And I'm not saying it's better than episode 3. 3 and 5 for me is on a pedestal above the entire series. Like, it's an incredible series. It's one of the best series I've ever watched. But 3 and 5 just sit above everything else. But yeah, your thoughts on that death scene?
It's all about the characters. It really is with this. And I saw some complaints, shocking, about it not cutting to black and it staying on Ellie's face and whatever, which I thought was the absolute, probably one of the most silliest things that I've heard about this show so far, because the whole thing is, being invested in these characters and wanting them to survive. So getting those, reverse shots, you get those back and forth, shot reverse shots of these characters, their reactions. It's like Henry, Joel, Ellie, it's what's just happened, what's going on. It's less about the shock value. I think in the game, it was all about the shock value of getting this done. It wasn't to do with what they do after, because we know they're just going to move on. With this, it's way more personal. and you've got to see it. And it's mainly Henry and Ellie that we need to see, because there are a few seconds whilst Ellie's on the floor and Sam's trying to get her, where, you know, Henry shoots the gun by Joel. He's unsure, but I think as soon as he realizes, he's like, and he needs to do it.
And he's never killed someone.
No, but clearly it's a reflex of saving someone. I think it shows his true nature, that he is a force of good. He's not doing what he's been doing to try and hurt people. But to shoot your own brother, awful thing. To then have that realization that you've shot your brother, that your brother that you've gone above and beyond to help is no longer there. The idea of failing your sibling, the only other person in your life, just horrendous. And that you see it in his head. I think the acting was so good here. You see kind of the realization, and kind of the, not moment of defeat, but just kind of like, well, this is it, and just shoot. And then Bella Ramsey looking at this, like her face, I was like, it was absolutely amazing. And then to have a burial, to have that, and that I'm sorry. And the thing is with Ellie, which I thought was so good about this, is that if it wasn't for her, they would have died in the cul-de-sac. She really went out of her way to save Henry and Sam. She did that, and she saved them from that. So regardless, she did more than she probably should have done, and she did it. So the fact that she feels such guilt and then is so kind of disheartened afterwards, it's awful, but it's absolutely fantastic television. And I also have to commend what it does for Joel a little bit. He's less of a focus, but his fear for Ellie, and you hear it, and as soon as Sam's been killed, Joel's going for her to make sure she's okay. And it's just little hints like that, just showing the relationship getting stronger. But obviously Henry keeps him back. It's an absolute wonderful piece to just really make sure that this relationship's going to grow even stronger, which I'm sure we'll see more in the future episodes. But it's intense. It's really intense, and it's really sad. And I'm not surprised that this is this has a lot of audience approval, and that lots of people are crying as well.
Yeah, and I think what you said there about Joel as well, I don't think he's pleading with Sam like, oh, sorry, I don't think he's pleading with Henry like, oh, you're going to kill me, I'm already holding a gun. Joel's worried because he's got a gun to his head, and Joel does care about this person that he's met for a couple of days. He's just had to watch him kill his brother who's been infected, and it is just, the writing is through the roof, the direction, the way the scene's done, the burial, it is just perfect TV. And again, it's just the testament to the show, to the showrunners, to everyone involved, acting, script, music. It is the best show on TV at the moment. We've got Dave in the comments, evening. What's episode? Superb. This is it. And it just makes it so much more exciting that we've got a few more episodes. So we've still got another 4 weeks to talk about. And just kind of heading off that, giving my final thoughts on episode 5. I kind of said it before. This is my favorite episode of the series. I think it's Country Mile in the best two. But I think, again, because of that attachment to the game, to moments from this episode, those moments that strike back to me playing it when I'm younger, playing it recently, to the acting performances all around it, to me, it's just unbelievable. And kind of not comparing to episode 3, which is really unfair, but to see, once again, we bring in these supporting characters, we're going to develop them. We don't need to, we don't have to. Could easily have them for another 10 minutes walking around with Joel and Ellie, but we're going to develop these guys, give them a backstory, have credible villains in Kathleen, who's equally, she's dealt with loss in the same manner. It's just so well done, and just full hat to everyone involved at HBO for this and for getting the series to where it is 5 episodes in. It is still above the rest.
Yeah, I don't know if I can't. Did I say it at the beginning of this, or was it off? Was it off camera? Where
I know 3 is still your favorite, which is bang on.
I think 3 is my favorite, but I mean, even objectively, I would say 3 is probably for me the best made of the episode. However, best made episodes. However, for me, episode 1, at least the first half of it, and this episode are very close behind that anyway. And as I said, like, I mean, all of these episodes that we've had so far are so excellent that even being the weakest is still so strong. There's not really been any sidesteps, hiccups that I've gone, oh, that wasn't that great. But no, it was just a wonderful episode, and it's, you know, for many of us, we knew what it was going to be, but it was so much more than what it was as well, which was the surprise for, I think, everyone, and that made it all the more meaningful. And yeah, it was just nice to experience it in a really awful way, and to get a chance to see those characters. You know, it's like you said, if it was a film, they cut a lot of things out of film adaptations, and so to get at least, I think, a good adaptation of this specific story is fantastic, and I'm just glad that they succeeded, and that the acting, again, I've got to applaud the acting with this one because it's just so important. Everyone was on top form. Everyone.
No, absolutely. And that is going to round out another spoiler discussion for The Last of Us. We said it won't be as long this time. We've still gone over an hour as we do. But we want to hear from you. So if you are not watching it live, you're watching it later on, please do let us know your thoughts. If you're watching it live, if you comment along, thank you as always for doing so. Do hit that like button and subscribe if you have enjoyed this. If you're ready for more Last of Us videos, we'll have another episode next week to talk about episode 6. That's going to be an intriguing one. I'm curious to see what people think for that. But in the meantime, go find us on social medias to find out what else is coming out. Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy, and a link to Redbubble in that description below. It's been a long day. It's been one of those. We don't have to plug the James Cameron retrospective because it is now finished. The last episode was live yesterday. Titanic, joined by Sam and Paul. Thank you to everyone that was getting involved in that series too. It's Oscar season. There's still more reviews. Ant-Man's out on Friday. There's a lot of things happening. So we'll be back. We'll let you know when we do. But in the meantime, take care, and we'll see you on the next one.